Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. Can you hear me in the back? Good. I am thrilled to be here. 20 years of teaching religion, and I still get nervous. So something good is happening. I really am grateful to you for coming today, and I'm truly grateful to our chaplain, Jan Fuller, for all the hard work that she does, for Jan Register, her able assistant, for all the staff, the student interns, and I'm grateful to Elon University. This is a great place. I am so glad to have found a home here at Elon. And I remember when it was Elon College, the campus was about half as big, or at least half as many buildings, right? And now apparently we can't build them fast enough. It's an exciting time to be at Elon. And I'm really grateful that you came over, because I think it is very important that the university maintain a healthy relationship with the broader community. For instance, if we could can the wisdom and life experience in this room at this moment and sell it on eBay, we would be zillionaires, right? But I also wanted to say thank you to the students who are here today. Some of you are already members of my tribe. Now, students will tell you I don't teach classes here. I build tribes, right? I'm the shaman. You are now, congratulations, honorary members of my tribe. And you're welcome, okay? Well, the question we need to ask today and over the next 2 months, I mean, we really only have one thing to do here, okay? Just one thing. And that is figure out the meaning of life. All right, we have 2 months to do it. You think we can pull it off? I like your enthusiasm. I say we give it a shot. Let's see what we can figure out, okay? Honestly, I see the religions, the religious traditions, and the religious experience of humankind down through the ages as, among so many other things, a search for meaning, right? If you'll pardon my French, I think we've always been trying to figure out what the hell is going on here, right? Why are we here? I mean, are you the kind of person who asks that question? I know I am. There are days when I wish I wasn't. Actually, there are nights when I wish I wasn't, but I'm that guy, and I always have been, right? Just trying to figure out what's going on. I envy people who seem to walk through life without really worrying about the existential question, right, of existence. But one of the lenses, if you will, through which we can look at religion itself and the various religious traditions is as a search for meaning. People throughout the ages have worked hard to try to figure out what life is all about, right? And I think at one level or another, we all struggle with this, whether it's in the forebrain or the back brain. I mean, you get up in the morning, and why? Why? Why do we do the things that we do? Why have we lived the lives that we've lived, right? Why are we making the choices that we make? And we usually think about it in these small chunks, right? But religion gives us an opportunity to think about the bigger picture, our relationship to the world, to the divine, to the hereafter, to the here before, right? All of these things enter into it. And if you've come here for answers, you might be in the wrong place. What I have for you are questions. And there was a time in my life as a younger man when I was all about answers. I come out of a chaotic family background, you might say. I'm sure I'm the only one in this room who does, right? Yeah. I thought maybe I was in good company. And as a young man, I needed answers. Just give me some truth, man. The world's so complex, right? And in many ways so hurtful and disappointing, right? And precarious. Just to live as a mortal. And what I wanted was, I need some black and white truth, man. Just Put it to me as simply as you possibly can. And those answers lasted for a while, perhaps as long as they needed to, right? But there came a time when they just weren't enough. They were too simplistic. Life doesn't match up all too often with a black and white vision of what it is supposed to be like. It's complex. It's full of gray areas, right? We wonder, am I doing the right thing, right? We spend our lives like meteorologists trying to predict the future. If I do X, what will be Y, right? What if it turns out to be Z? And so we live in this maelstrom, if you will. We are in this river that just flows on, right? Time carries us forward as it always does. Apparently, we're only here for a little while, right? And why? And why? You know, why did you get up this morning? What were you looking for? What motivates you, right? And maybe the biggest question of all is, why is there such a thing as religion in the first place? Why are people religious? And that's not a rhetorical question. I'm really asking you, why are people religious? What do people get out of being religious? Because not everybody is. Some people seem to do perfectly well without it. Tell me, come on, help me out here. Tell me one thing that people get from religion. Hope. Thank you. Absolutely. What else?
Meaning.
Meaning. Yes. Comfort. Absolutely. Yeah. Community.
Peace.
A sense of peace, right? Anything else?
Adventure.
Adventure. I like that attitude. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So many things, right? So many things. What would the world look like if there were no such thing? If we had never been religious, would the world be a better place?
That's a Sam Harris question.
Or would it lapse into chaos? Would people just go crazy and run naked through the streets? What? Right?
I don't think we could live without, I don't think human beings, as they develop, would be able to.
Okay, so
There's something in, I think there's something in the state of being human that goes in that direction.
oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. But again, there are many people who are not religious.
That's true.
And some of them actually anti-religious, right?
Some of them are very kind and fair.
There you go, right? Good moral people, yeah, but without religion, right? I mean, and there are those who point out, and I think rightfully so, that religion all too often has been a source of violence, of small-mindedness, of even cruelty to other people, to other creatures, to the environment itself, right? And again, it's all mixed up in there together, right? It's such a complex thing when you really start taking it apart. What needs would you say may not be met by religion or being religious? Anything? Certainty? Now, there are those who argue that they get a great deal of certainty from their religion, but there would be those who would say, no, it's, in the end, a matter of faith and not of fact, right? And we need to talk about that whole science and religion. I almost said science versus religion. All too often that's been the case as well. Well, you have to wonder about these things. Another question I want to ask, and I don't know whether we know each other well enough to have this conversation yet, but let's see what we can do here. What does God look like? What does God look like? When I say the word God, right, if you, like me, grew up in the Western world, you have an image in your head, I am guessing, what God might look like, at least as He, right, as He has been popularly portrayed. Let me take a stab at it. Maybe Gandalf? You know who I'm talking about, Gandalf?
Michelangelo.
Yes. Michelangelo's portrait, yeah, the Sistine Chapel ceiling, right? Just a classic portrayal of, shall we say, the great white grandpappy in the sky.
Charlton Heston.
Think about that for a moment. Yes, Charlton Heston. Moses. Think about it, yeah. Great white grandpappy, right? How complex is that, right? First of all, as Westerners, we need to ask ourselves, is God a being? A being, with a capital B, if you will, right? Separate from us. Because again, I think that's how that relationship is usually portrayed. In the Western religions, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, right? We develop a relationship with God, which implies that originally we're not necessarily in that relationship, or it certainly has a different meaning, a different identity. But if you look at what we usually refer to as the Eastern religions, the major ones being Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, right? Not necessarily how the divine is portrayed. And I don't even use the G word, because the moment I do, there's Gandalf, right? We've just been trained that way. The divine has been constructed in that way. It's another way of looking at it for us, right? We have inherited that from generations past, right? And we carry it with us for good and perhaps for ill, right? Does that limit the divine in any way, that image, right? What if you're female? Did you, like me, grow up saying, "Our Father who art in heaven"? Think about that for a moment, okay? Our Father who art in heaven. Would it make any difference to pray "Our Mother who art in heaven"?
Yeah.
Same difference? Well, when I have said "Our Father who art in heaven," needless to say, the emotions connected for me with my relationship with my own father come to bear. What are the characteristics of a good father?
Reliability.
I'm sorry?
Reliability.
Reliability. What else? What does the father traditionally bring?
Provider.
He's a provider, right? Protector.
Teacher.
Teacher, love, yes. Okay, too much rock and roll, too many NASCAR races. I'm a little deaf, so I need you to speak up, okay? Some distance, okay, yeah.
Discipline and boundaries.
Thank you, discipline, right? There's some judgment involved, right? You don't mess with daddy, if you will. Well, let me ask you this. Traditionally speaking, what are the characteristics that we connect with motherhood? Nurturer, right? Compassion, right? Judgment for the father, perhaps, again, we're talking stereotypes here, but mercy for the mother. What else? Gentle, yes, yes. That's that you were talking about, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, does any of that get lost if we, or as we, visualize the divine in male terms? I wonder. The Hindus don't have this problem, right? They have gods and goddesses by the millions, and I'm not exaggerating, right? And of course, more recently, the language in many religious institutions has been changing to try to reflect this broader understanding that the divine can be seen in ways that are not necessarily specifically male-oriented, right? But again, is God separate from us? I think that's a huge question, right? In my classroom, I don't have a blackboard, so we'll just improvise here. If God, if this is God, right, and humans are here, that tends to be the Western depiction of the relationship with the divine. And what that means is We are separate from the divine. We must find a way to God or back to God, right? And that's why prayer is a very popular ritual in the West, whereas in the East it's more meditation, and we'll talk about why in a moment. You could say that each of the Western religions has developed its own way to bridge the gap between God and us. For the Jews, you follow the teachings of Moses, right? As you live in accordance with the Torah, you bridge that gap. You walk in intimacy with the divine, much as Adam and Eve did in the garden before things went off the rails, as it were, right? Islam, very similar, right? You follow the teachings of Muhammad, and it repairs that relationship. Christianity is a little bit different. Same scenario, I think, but who is it that helps us out? And I say us because I am a recovering Baptist. I want you to know that right up front. I'm walking the steps one day at a time. Okay. I want to apologize, but I'm not going to. No, seriously, I am truly, deeply grateful to have been raised in the church, first of all, but in a Baptist church. Hasn't always been easy. Small town in South Kakalaki. But no, the older I get, the more grateful I am for having been introduced to music and other art forms, right? And those people, that community someone mentioned a while ago, Birdie Mae Bates, okay? Birdie Mae Bates. How's that for a good Southern name? I will never forget in Vacation Bible School, her standing over my shoulder, helping me to memorize the scriptures, right? How could she have known, right, that exercise in compassion would have led me to where I am today, right? Because she helped instill in me this love of words and of learning and of knowledge. Okay, I've taken a left turn. You're going to have to help me get back to the main road here. Oh, Christianity. Who is it that gets us over that gap? It's Jesus. But why Jesus and why not somebody else? What's so special about him? Both here and here, both divine and human, right? So again, he repairs that relationship. Well, the point I'm trying to make is that there is a relationship to be had, right? And developed, if not repaired, recreated even, right? When sin enters into the picture. But in the East, it's not those separate circles, right? You're talking, the circle of the divine, and then here we are smack in the middle. There's no separation. You're born into the divine, right? You are never separate from the divine. It's not a matter, religion, a religious life, a good life is not a matter of getting back to God. It's finding the divine within your own self, where it, and I can't say he here, right? Where it, and that can be a little, uncomfortable till you get used to it, right? Where it has always been. Always. You couldn't be separate from the divine if you wanted to be, right? But what happens is, and there are varying versions of this, what happens is, and we're going to look at this in more detail when we get to Hinduism and Buddhism, what happens is our souls, which are perfect, because they are literally divine, right, get covered over by a kind of muck, the muck of karma, right? You familiar with karma? What goes around comes around, right? If you do good, good comes back to you. If you do bad, bad's going to come back to you, right? That's what messes us up. So the religious life is really about peeling off these layers of muck, right, that have so coated our inner lamp, if you will, that it cannot shine. There's something truly appealing about that understanding of one's relationship with the divine. And not just because it's different or exotic somehow, though perhaps that too. So I want us to think about these things, okay? I want us to think about these things. Part of what we have to do as learners is figure out what we brought into this room with us when we showed up, right? The more we see where our assumptions come from, right? The more aware we become of how we have been constructed, if you will, as people, not just by ourselves, right? We're the ones in main control, I suppose, but by others around us, and not even just that, but people who came before us. Who is your Bertie Mae Bates? Right? Who is it that taught you, right? And the very society in which we live is so affected and infected, if you will, by religion. I mean, think about it. To the founding fathers, the very laws on which this country is based, right? It was already here waiting for us when we were birthed into it, right? It has been a part of our inheritance. And so what we need to do is unpack where we came from as a way of figuring out who we are and where we're going. Now, again, let me ask you, and this is not rhetorical, when I ask the question, what is religion? What comes into your head? What do you think about when that term pops up?
Ritual.
Ritual, absolutely, very important aspect.
Beliefs. Beliefs.
Beliefs, oh yeah, very much so. Going to church, thank you. Going to temple, going to mosque, right? Going to that clearing in the forest, right? I think all of those would fit here. What else? A safety net, yeah. A safety net. A recruiter? Say a little.
Religion has to bring in more of the same, or religion doesn't continue.
Oh, yes. There's a bureaucratic element to what is happening here, is there not? And bureaucracies, as you know, live to replicate themselves. Oh, yeah. And you know, you'll see that each religious tradition passes itself on, its teachings on in different ways, but it's important that they continue to do so. There have been people who have argued that religion eventually will disappear. The voices who make that argument are a lot fewer now than they were 20 years ago, right? Because it does seem to be with us for quite some time. Well, let me see if I can give you a metaphor that's going to help us over the next 2 months. And it has a lot to do with how I teach religion. It just so happened for me, for whatever reasons, you know, God's will or karmic fate or dumb luck or whatever, that the first time I remember beholding the face of the divine was through the windows, those stained glass windows of Tabernacle Baptist Church. June the 18th, 1972. And it changed me deeply and apparently permanently, okay? And one of the ways in which I have come to understand religion and each of the religions is that they can be seen as windows on the world, a lens, if you will, through which we understand life and our role in it, right? Different ways of looking at life. So you have the Christian way, and what a complex window that is. I mean, think about Christianity for a moment. It's part of the difficulty of talking about religion. How incredibly complex it is. Who are those Christians? Well, is it the Southern Baptists? Well, yeah. Is it the United Church of Christ? Yeah. Is it the Mormons? Well, yeah. Is it, who's the guy in the fancy pointy hat over there in Rome? Oh, yes, Pope Francis, right? Those Roman Catholics, Christian, yeah. What about, oh, here's one. What about that voodoo priestess down in New Orleans? Conjuring up a hex to put on an unfaithful lover. What about her? Christian? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the thing about New Orleans, right? Such a mixture. Such a hodgepodge, right? Roman Catholicism blended with native religion, right? Actually, West African native religion, and I think we all know how West African religion ended up in New Orleans. It was imported, shall we say? Yeah. But has become a very important element of life in the United States. So Christianity itself is something of a complex window. I mean, it's hard enough to get people within the same religion to agree what their religion really is, right? Yeah. So each of these different religions is a different window. Now, I grew up with one window. And as I said, I'm grateful for that window. But that was the only one. In fact, those people back then were telling me that is the only one. The only way you will ever see the divine is through this window. All the other windows, don't even think about them, because they will lead you to a very hot place. No pressure, right? Yeah. And it was taking a course like this at Furman University in the middle 70s, right? When it just blew my mind to have been raised to believe this one thing, everything else is wrong. And here I am looking at these different religions, Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism, and really looking at Judaism for the first time, because I'd always gotten that Christian version of Judaism, which is so different from what the Jews will tell you their own religious tradition is about. I just remember thinking and feeling very guilty about it at the time. Not only is Christianity not the only religion, it might not even be the most interesting one, right? Wow. It's just fascinating to learn about them. And so if we think of each one as a window, this course is an opportunity for us to peer through those other windows, right? To see the world with other eyes as much as we are capable of doing so. And that to me is an awesome opportunity. And by awesome, I mean it's an excellent opportunity, but it's also awesome in the sense, and this really is the underpinning not only of, in many ways, Elon University, but certainly the Newman Lumen, the chaplain's office. So much of what we do here, it really is about doing whatever we can to understand others, to build a foundation of knowledge, right? To be as open-minded as possible, to lose the prejudice, right? The narrow-mindedness, to move forward into what is rapidly becoming, in case you haven't noticed, a global village where we all rub elbows together, right? And that's a scary thing for a lot of people. It's one of the reasons fundamentalism has taken such a hold in so many different cultures and, unfortunately, through so many different religions, right? It's frightening. Things are changing and changing so rapidly. But I also see it as a beautiful thing. I mean, as a species, we're coming together in ways that we never have. And God knows we need to, because we're walking the raggedy edge of, if not extinction, at least a definite, some serious karma is coming down the pike, right? In terms of nature, the ways that we have failed to take care of our own campground, if you will, right? I mean, we're in dire shape here. And I know there are students here at Elon University, and I'm always appreciative, who are interested in studying the environment and learning ways to help change things, right, before it is too late, if it isn't already. And it's, for most of us in this room, it's not going to be our problem any more than it already is. It's the younger people who we're going to deal with. They're going to have to clean up our mess in much the same way that I know my generation has done for the generation before. We've got to learn these things, right? Meanwhile, violence rages. There are people killing each other today, even as we speak. Again, so much of it out of ignorance and narrow-mindedness, right? And an inability to see through somebody else's window. So anything we can possibly do, it's certainly been my life's work, to open minds and hearts to this fuller understanding that however scary it might be, right, however different or even threatening it might feel, that it is okay, not just okay, but necessary, needful, that we see how others see and feel how they feel. That to build a conversation in the world about how on earth we can possibly get along, right? And end the violence and bring peace. I am, in case you haven't noticed, a hippie, okay? And I still believe in the possibility of the world peace. It was so awesome to see Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr on stage last night, still living it, right? Still living it. Yeah. Well, back to the metaphor. Not that we've left it. Religion can be seen, and the religious traditions can be seen as windows on the world, okay? But one of the things I find fascinating about religion and the study of it is that religion can also be seen as a mirror, right? Because when you look into these other religious traditions, and if you yourself are religious, when you look into your own, you aren't just studying an object out there, right? It's important to take that outsider view as much as you can, right, to get the objectivity. But it's also going to reflect back on you. It's going to show you something about yourself, right? Whether you're looking at your own tradition or someone else's. It's not just dry science, if you will, certainly scientific in many ways, right? But you're going to learn things about yourself, about your own assumptions and presumptions, right? About, well, I'd like to think you come to an even fuller appreciation of your own religious tradition, again, if you choose to be. Not to mention those of others, right? So to me, as both an insider, right, having been raised in a particular religious tradition, and as an outsider, someone who's tried to step back, if not out of that circle, and look back in, right, I see it as very reflexive, right? You're not just learning about other people, you're also learning about yourself and something about your relationship with those other people. And if I might push that metaphor just a little bit farther, in hopes of not breaking it, religion can be a window, it can be a mirror, but it can also be a kind of kaleidoscope. You know what a kaleidoscope is, right? It's usually a tube, and you're looking through, and whatever that might be at the end, marbles or shards of glass, or right? And you draw a bead on what you're looking at, okay? And when we're looking at Hinduism, let's go with Hinduism. Oh yeah. You might get an idea about what you're thinking about, what you're talking about, what you're looking at. But then you learn something new. You twist that kaleidoscope just a little bit. And it's the same shards, same marbles, right? Same. But somehow it's shifted. It's different, right? And another thing, too, we study religion in the flow of time. The guiding metaphor that I've used for religion in my own life and in my own teaching, it's an organism. It is a living thing. And because it is living, right, it changes. It grows. So it's one thing to try to figure out what Hinduism might be today. That's complex enough. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people in different areas. But also, it's important to see where it has come from, how it has evolved down through the centuries, right? I would say the same thing about every one of the religious traditions, right? Yeah. So, we're up against it, people, right? We have a huge job to do, but I think we can get it done. There's another caution, actually, that I want to give. For one thing, this is not Sunday school. Not that there's anything wrong with Sunday school, okay? It's not Sunday school. I'm not here to preach one particular religious view, and if you catch me doing it, you please point that out to me, right? I mean, it's been difficult in many ways to step back and really try to treat each religious tradition fairly, and struggle to hear the voices of those who practice these religions. And that's another part of the caution. We're not just studying some poor, specimen laid out on a table somewhere. We're actually looking at the lives of people. People like you and me, right? Every bit as vulnerable, as hopeful, as mean, as awesome, right? Every bit as complex as we are. And I want us to keep that in mind as we go through here, to give each their due, really try to hear that voice, right? And look through those eyes. And if we do, then I think we have pretty much done our job, or at least we've gotten started on it. I mentioned religion as an organism. Okay, one of the ways that we can, first of all, this is impossible. Hinduism in an hour? Christianity in an hour? Whoa. But we'll do the best we can. As Chaplain Fuller pointed out, this course is really a teaser, It's just an introduction to an introduction, and I hope it will give you some pointers maybe, perhaps some enthusiasm about doing more of your own research, right? Our awesome library staff is going to be providing us in the weeks to come with some books, some information about where your further study might go. So each of these weeks is going to have to be something of a snapshot, okay? And not unlike your teacher, it's probably going to be a little idiosyncratic, right? Each week it might not be the same. Sometimes we're going to need to, well, partly because I want to, but partly because we need to, zero in on a particular, for instance, with Buddhism, what I would love to do is walk us through the life story of the Buddha himself as an entryway into Buddhism as a much larger and more complex phenomenon. So each week that might well be different. One of the things that I want to talk a little bit about today, and I touched on it before, is the relationship of religion and science. And one way to go about that, there are scholars who have tried to develop tools for studying religion and the religions, right? Because you come up against a religious tradition, again, like Hinduism, which is just so, 330 million gods and goddesses. Where do you even start, right? And it's just this big, beautiful blob of religion, right? Wow. Well, as I say, scholars have developed different tools for approaching that complex phenomenon. And one of the ways of doing it is to divide the religions up into what one scholar calls the dimensions of religion. I mentioned the kaleidoscope. If we look at those smaller dimensions, maybe it'll help us. And a couple of you have touched on some of these. Ritual, you'll find it through all of the religious traditions. Sometimes it's more emphasized than others. Myth is another one. There's always a social dimension to every religion. How is it that people relate to one another and to those who are not necessarily within their own religious tradition? There's an ethical dimension. Each religion is going to tell you something about what is right and what is wrong, how to live a good life, what it looks like when you're not living a good life. The experiential dimension, which I find endlessly fascinating, being something of a mystic myself. Looking at the ways that various people describe their own religious experience. That's what that book Godspeed was all about, right? Where what we usually talk about when we talk about religion, in that book I wanted to ask, might there be other experiences that we would not ordinarily count as religious, but that have what looks to me like, and even feels to me like it's the same experience, it just goes under a different label. Okay, all right, I'm gonna chase this rabbit because it's a really cool rabbit, okay? So come with me and I'll try to find my way back. Oh, when I get to the end of this, somebody say myth, okay? Maybe that'll help. All right, what started me on that quest in Godspeed, it's a book about the role of religion in NASCAR. right? High-speed auto racing, which traditionally has been a Southern sport. And if you know anything about the South, right, and I'm sure you do, we're kind of religious down here, right? The Bible Belt and all of that. But what happened, there was a time that I was at a race, and I'm watching this guy, and he's down on the front row, and he has his shirt off, and he's just that stereotypical, NASCAR fan. I don't know how many beers he had had, but he had had a few, right? And here come these cars going faster than God ever intended us to go, right? There are 43 of them. They're this far apart, right? And when they come by, you can't even hear them because your entire body has become an eardrum. You're just vibrating, right? And it is literally an awesome, as in overpowering experience, right? You lose your breath for a little while. And there he is. And he is just so into that moment. For one thing, he's yelling at the top of his lungs. I can't hear him, but I know that's what he's doing, right? And the look of joy and excitement on his face, of satisfaction, is just stunning. It's stunning, okay? Now, I have seen that look before. And it was in a Pentecostal church. And it was a woman. She's down at the front. And the Spirit is upon her. And she's just caught up in rapture, just completely one with the divine, right? And she's shouting. And that look of joy and satisfaction. She's found her meaning, right? NASCAR Yahoo, Pentecostal devotee, qu'est-ce que c'est la différence? Right? What's the difference? Is one religious because it happened in a church, and the other one's not because it happened at this, secular cultural institution? The article about hip-hop, you might have noticed that younger people are not as religious as past generations have been, by and large. Well, I'm not so sure about that. They are less traditionally religious than generations past, right? Perhaps less likely to involve themselves in a traditional church or temple or a mosque. But that doesn't necessarily mean they're not religious. And part of what I mean by that is that doesn't mean they're not still asking the same questions that have always been asked. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? How do I figure this out, right? They're asking those questions. They've just decided to look elsewhere. And one of the places they look is their music. There are those who bemoan that poetry is dead. How long has it been since you actually bought a book of poetry? There might actually be some people in this room who have, right? People don't read it the way they used to. Well, is that really true? We may not sit down with a book of poetry, but every time you listen to a song, is that not poetry? Right? It's just translated into this other medium, right? And from that music, do you not draw some meaning? Perhaps some joy? You have that song that still takes you back to high school, and she hasn't broken your heart quite yet, and life is still hopeful, right? Excuse me. Do you have that song? I thought you did, yeah. It touches us at the deepest level of our beings, and it offers us some sense of meaning, some sense of joy, right? And I wonder if that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about religion. Now,
Myth.
Thank you. Myth. One of the major dimensions of religion. Let me wet my whistle here. Is myth. It's been called the narrative aspect of religion, right? And when I say myth, I mean religious stories, okay? Somebody tell me a religious myth. What is it? Thank you, David and Goliath. Now, in my home church, if you had said that story was a myth, they would have told you you're going to hell. That was awesome. Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. Well, yes, it's a myth. Well, here's the thing. A couple of different ways of using that term, right? And when we use it in everyday, common parlance, right? It usually has some implications, right? If your partner, your husband, your spouse tells you something and you say that's just a myth, what are you implying? Yeah, that it's not true. Well, in religious studies, don't even think about myth that way. It's not a statement of truth or non-truth. It's not a judgment value. To say that a story like the story of David and Goliath is a myth is simply to describe it as a religious story, which means it is a story that the Jewish people and the Christian people tell themselves over the centuries, right? For centuries, that story has been circulating to help themselves understand where they came from, where they're going, and who they are, right? It's like George Washington and that cherry tree. Did George Washington chop down that tree? It's a myth. Does it really matter whether or not he chopped down the tree? The better question, the more productive question to ask about these religious stories is, why do people tell these stories? Why do Americans tell that story that George Washington chopped down a tree and then owned up to it? I'll give you a hint. It's not about George Washington. I mean, it is, but again, think in terms of the mirror. What are we saying about ourselves as Americans? That we're an honest people, or at least that we strive to be, right? I think that's the point of myth. So with David and Goliath, you got to ask yourself, why would you tell a story about the underdog winning? If you know anything about Jewish history, good grief, yeah, right? Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. Yes. Sometimes the little guy wins, right? So if one of the most important roles that religion plays in our lives is to give us a picture of what the world looks like and why, right? Which enables us to live in it, then myths are those stories we tell ourselves to give us that meaning, to bolster it, right? To help us understand who we are, where we're going, and how we should behave in the meantime. Now, somebody mentioned a while ago that certainty is one of the things we could get even if there were no such thing as religion, right? That religion really is not about certainty in the end, right? It's more a matter of faith. But one of the questions that I think is important for us to ask, and I wish some of my colleagues from the sciences were here today, and then again, maybe it's best that they're not, I don't know. But I want to talk a little bit about science. And I teach religious studies. I'm in the humanities. What do I know about science? Well, a little bit. But one of the questions I want to ask my scientist friends is there anything mythological about science? Science is all about hard fact, right? It's all about hard fact. Is there a mythological element to that at all? All right, I got just a few minutes here. Let me read you an article from the newspaper. It's some time ago, but here we go. In recent weeks, a cascade of discoveries has thrown into confusion cherished concepts about the evolution of the universe. Astronomers reported finding an extremely long sheet of galaxies dubbed the Great Wall, which is the largest structure known in the universe. Stretching for at least 1 billion light years. You didn't even flinch. Oh, sure, 1 billion light years. We use that language all the time. Who in the world measured this thing and how? Where did they get the tape measure for this, right? At least 1 billion light years. Oh my gosh, we don't have time to deconstruct what a light year is. Maybe we can do that in the conversation time. It is too large to accord with most current thinking on how an initially smooth universe got so incredibly lumpy. Out of all the universes I could have been born into, I got the wrinkly one, okay? Yeah. About the same time, scientists discovered the most distant light yet detected from a quasar. What? I think I saw a quasar once on Star Trek. What on earth is a quasar? No, what in the sky is a quasar? Oh, wait,
The article tells us a quasar or quasi-stellar object. Well, that clears it right up, doesn't it? Which is surprisingly, it gets better, which is surprisingly close to the edge of the cosmos and hence near the beginning of time. Edge of the cosmos, beginning of time. It's fact. It's measurable, quantifiable fact, right? Well, is it? Is it? What is the major scientific myth, if you will, story about how the universe came to be in the first place? The Big Bang. And they'll tell you in a heartbeat that it's a theory, right? But that's not how it is received, is it? No, that's just the way things happen. The Big Bang, right? The Big Bang. How do we know? And what was there to bang? What banged? It doesn't really explain anything any more than to say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You haven't explained where we came from, because you haven't explained where God came from. You haven't explained what banged. But is it not a story that gives us meaning, that helps us understand where we came from, right? Who we are, where we're headed? I think it plays very much the same role, right? We live in myth. We are narrative-making beings, right? It's the way we understand ourselves, the way we communicate ourselves to each other. And so what I am so looking forward to doing in these weeks to come is looking at some of these stories that have been shared down through the centuries, because I think what we might find here is the collective wisdom of the human race. And what a glorious opportunity it is to peer into that deep well of meaning. I wish you a good week, and I'll see you next week. Well, and we still have some conversation to take care of, do we not? Yeah, but thank you.